Good evening, Des Moines. Welcome to the Doc and Lefty program here on webcast1live.com. This is Lefty coming to you every Tuesday night from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. in the glowing halogen light of the webcast1live.com studios here downtown Des Moines. With me, as always, is my partner in crime, fresh from his hunger strike at the Republicans Against Fun rally, Dr. Petrosh. Doc, how's it going?
You know what? I should have more of those because I've been losing a lot of weight lately. You know, I will tell you, I found a new toy. I don't even know whose this is, but if you heard some noises during the intro, that was me fooling around with it.
Did you get a boo button?
I did get a boo button. Here you go.
Oh,
yeah, there you go.
That's the only way a Republican can really find any opposition to a Democratic idea. Get an electronic toy to back him up.
You know, I'm going to tell you, Lewis Black said it best. Democrats are the party of no ideas, and Republicans are the party of great ideas. That's
not what Lewis Black said.
That's what I'm paraphrasing.
That's a complete misquote and a mischaracterization of the
one word.
Yeah,
one word doesn't mean that much.
That's except the entire structure and meaning of the sentence.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, so there's a lot going on. There's a lot to talk about. We were going to have super friend of the show, Representative Tom Shaw, in the studio tonight. He got hung up, so he I guess is going to be calling in a little bit, or we're going to call him at some point. A phone call is going to be made to somebody. And we're going to hopefully get the representative on the air. So how's your week been?
You know, my week's been pretty okay. It's only Tuesday, and, you know, I figure, you know, I'm not dead yet.
It's tax day.
Today is tax day. I got my taxes paid. We were talking right before the show that...
Not even close.
Not even close. Yes.
Well, all the numbers, I will say this, all the numbers are put together, but because 2013 was such a weird year for me, I had some weird structure things go on where the business kind of changed from one structure to another, made it a little bit more complicated, and making sure that all the various 1099s and 1096s and 2040Qs and all those kind of things, the last one is a fake form, by the way, are straightened out. I had to go... the business has to go to an accountant anyway, but I have to go to an accountant to sort my stuff out for the first time in my tax preparing life. How about that?
Well, that's just nuts. Now that we're talking about taxes, don't you think the tax code should be a lot simpler than this? Don't you think it should be a fairly straightforward thing to say, I made this much money, I had these deductions, and that's what I owe the government, and send it in?
That's kind of what it is already.
No, it isn't. I mean, look at all the forms you have to go. Why do you have to go to an accountant just to get your business taxes figured out? You should say, well, I made $10,000 this year. I paid my secretary $5,000 and I have $5,000 left over. I owe 20% of that. I cut a check and send it off. Why don't you think we should have something that simple?
But I mean, that's what I did last year. This year there were more different things going on that are beyond my expertise. It'd be the same. I mean, that argument is the same as say, you know, I know that I'm owed some money, and I know that you can sue people, so I'm going to not hire a lawyer to sue to get my money back. I mean, I love changing the oil in the cars. Doesn't make me a car expert.
Well, I know, but you should be able to send in your taxes, you know, without having to go through a whole lot of stuff. I mean, H&R Block tells us all the time, people leave $1 billion on the table every year by not using a professional. Do you really think our tax code should be that complicated? I mean, it's up to 70,000 pages or whatever, and so many billions of words.
I mean, I don't know if you're going to talk about making well, you're saying it's complicated because it's long.
I'm saying it's complicated because, you know, people want tax breaks and they want special interests and they want special treatment. And the more complicated you make something, the less likely it is you're going to be up front and pay what you owe. I mean, we hear from the left all the time about how you should pay your fair share. Well, here's GE sitting there. Not only don't they pay taxes, they get $1 billion a year back because of the loopholes in tax structure that we have.
Yeah.
Don't you think we ought to just shut all that down and say, listen, you get legitimate business expenses back, research and development business, expenses back. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to show a profit, and you're going to have to pay a tax on that profit. Don't you think it should be fairly simple and straightforward instead of having to jump all through these legal hoops?
I think that let's put it this way. The basic principle that you're describing is already embodied in the tax code. Gross income, less expenses, net profit, and the net profit's what's taxed. That's the simplest way to talk about it. Now, do I think that what are characterized popularly as tax loopholes and giveaways to corporations and some of the other deductions that are out there that maybe don't make a lot of sense for folks anymore should be either done away with or reformed or simplified in some way? Of course I do. To me, that's really a no-brainer, and that's where you see a lot of agreement between the parties on the tax issue. But when I hear folks on the right talk about simplifying the tax code, what they're talking about is simplifying the tax rate itself. And you and I have gone around and around about this. We disagree a lot, but we also agree somewhat that a pure, straight across the board flat tax might not be the best thing for the country. A progressive, not big P progressive, but a stair-step approach to taxes might not. And then we can argue about the brackets as they are.
Well, just my brother Joe just sent a line that I think is genius. It's complicated because it's complicated. That's a typical lawyer answer for you. I mean, lawyers live in the world of words, world of, one word means this. It might mean something slightly different. So they make a lot of money doing that, So
the lawyers didn't write the tax code, though. I mean,
they did.
Legislators did.
And what are majority of legislators?
I don't know. Well, I don't think so.
Majority of
in the federal government.
Oh yeah,
I'm not so sure about that.
Oh man,
I don't want to have an argument about it because I didn't look it up.
We're on now. We're arguing.
But I thought I didn't think that at the federal level, the majority of folks in the legislature were lawyers themselves.
All right. Well, we do have Tom Shaw on the phone. But it's time to take a break. So I figured I'd argue with you a bit, and then we'll take a break, be right back with you.
Okay, sounds good.
Right. You're listening to Doc and Lefty on webcast1live.com. We're here every Tuesday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. Stay tuned to a word from our sponsors. Stay tuned for a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back right after the break.
Petrosian Associates, how can I help you?
Bertroche and Associates will provide you with a friendly, caring, and confidential place to find help for mental health concerns. We are ready for your call. Our doctor, Dr. J. Patrick Bertroche, provides a full range of psychiatric services for children, adolescents, and adults in a forthright and informative manner while maintaining a casual, comfortable, and relaxed atmosphere.
All across America, there are countless numbers of people struggling with addiction and other life-controlling issues. Probably someone you know and love. There is a way out. There is hope. Transformations Treatment Center in Delray Beach, Florida, has a unique approach to substance abuse treatment. Call now and ask about our Guaranteed Success program or log on to transformationstreatment.com. Transformations. Change your life. Change your relationships. Transform your world.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is the Doc and Lefty program, and we are, as always, on webcast1live.com. Thanks for sticking around for the first segment. Make sure that if you were interested in what we were talking about, go on Facebook, Doc and Lefty Facebook page. We've got the website. You can leave a comment there or follow us on Twitter. We'll be, I'm sure, tweeting our various thoughts about the different stupid things that the other person, Doc, says most of the time throughout the show. But anyway, on the phone with us is friend of the show, super friend of the show, almost super duper friend of the show. We have these tiered levels. And Representative, I got to say, I'm hoping that the check is in the mail for that big bump we just gave you. Tom Shaw, how you doing?
I'm doing just great. How are you doing this evening?
We're doing good. How are things up on the Capitol?
Well, I'm sorry I couldn't be there.
We are too, because Lefty was really wanting to tear into you. He spent 2 weeks getting ready.
Oh, he did.
Now we got to be nice to you.
Yeah. Well, we're still running some bills yet tonight, and so I was elected to come down here and push either an I or an A button. So I need to remain here.
Well, that's a fair.
We're at kind of a standstill right now, but we're going to be taking up the education budget, I believe, here in just a few minutes.
Well, so how long do you have with us then, Representative?
I should probably have a good 10 or 15 minutes at least.
Okay, sounds good. Now, did you get? Now you had two pieces of legislation on the on the calendar this year, correct? That you sponsored?
Well, I didn't. Yeah, two bills that have been submitted. They never did make it to the calendar, unfortunately.
They did, and was that they didn't make it through the funnel?
No, they did not.
All right. What were those? Are these the two bills that you were offered the last time around?
Yes, it's House File 138, which is basically, in layman's terms, life of conception bill. Or want to protect all innocent life, provide equal protection for all persons, regardless of their age or stage of biological development. And the second file is House File 2284, which is commonly referred to as constitutional carry. In other words, you don't have to go beg the government for a permit to exercise your right to keep and bear arms.
So, and those failed to make it through the Republican-controlled House.
Yes.
So what was the problem there?
I do not know. They just didn't seem interested in taking those bills up this year or last year.
Democrats, that's the problem with it. Well, I will tell you, don't you?
How can the Democrats have no power in the House?
Well, they have plenty of power. I mean, they're kind of like, Frank and I were talking before the show about how Satan works in your life. Just sitting next to evil will kind of make it, it's kind of like, Pigpen and his mess.
Well,
it kind of gets all over everything.
I'll remember that the next time you're asking for the rent check, there, buddy boy.
That's how it works. Actually, Tom, what do you think of this? Do you think it was because it was an election year and nobody wanted to tackle anything, controversial?
That could be their reasoning. Again, I don't know what their thoughts are. My thoughts are, it's an election year. We should absolutely be tackling these. This is what gets our base out to go vote for us. Well, in my experience, not only from I shouldn't say my district. I catch myself. The district that I represent. It's not only those constituents, but I hear from Iowans, all across the state that are just, I guess, they're being tired of giving lip service on these issues, and they want to see some action done. So I'm disappointed that we couldn't even get a debate on these two bills.
Now, Tom, I wanted to ask you really quick. Did you now you have announced before on various outlets, not even on this show, that you were not running for re-election here in November for the next 2 years. Is there now? Will these two measures kind of die with you, or is there somebody in the House that you can point to right now that's has a good prospect of being reelected or elected in November that's going to carry that torch for you?
Well, there's other co-sponsors on those bills, and I believe they'll pick it up again next year.
All right, now there's somebody running to replace you in your district. Do you think he'll pick up the flag and start running with it?
I have not talked to him specifically about these. We've talked about the Second Amendment, and his name is Mike Sexton. I know he fully supports the Second Amendment and also life. Whether he'll pick up the mantle on these two bills, specific bills, I don't know. I haven't had that discussion with him.
Okay, so who is responsible for trying to bring these bills out of committee so that they could be discussed and voted on?
Well, they were assigned to the Judiciary Committee, and they didn't even have the courtesy, as I would say, didn't even have the courtesy of being assigned a subcommittee. So they didn't even, make them out of the committee.
Wow. All right. So, by the way, we have a lovely picture of you that Frank keeps putting up. There you go. Isn't that one a handsome dude? Wouldn't you vote for him?
Would I? Well, I'm not in his district, so I don't have to really worry about that.
Well, I'm just saying. I mean, Lefty might almost vote for you. That's how much he likes you, Tom.
Well, I'd come in and shake his hand.
Okay. Good deal.
Well, remember what we talked about Democrats being evil. You don't want to get any on you, Tom.
That's true.
That's true.
That's a good point.
Before we go further, I will say one of the reasons I enjoy this show is we can have good debate, And I very much appreciate that.
Well, in that, while we have you then, in that vein, Representative, while I have you on the phone really quick, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you about the life bill, do you suppose, and this is probably speculation on your part, but if it was assigned to the Judiciary Committee, do you suppose there were some constitutional issues and with both the state and the federal Constitution that they might have it kind of died on the vine because of that?
No, I don't believe, because this is actually in keeping with the Constitution. It's actually in keeping with the Roe v. Wade decision. All Roe v. Wade basically said in a nutshell was that if the state finds it's a compelling reason to name that fetus as a person, then of course all the protections of the 14th Amendment apply.
Right.
This is actually right in keeping with Roe v. Wade. It's right in keeping with the state constitution on the rights of person. It's in keeping with the Declaration of Independence when we talk about unalienable right to life. These are self-evident truths, or they used to be a self-evident truth. And I guess what's frustrating to me is, why do we have to go back and reestablish a self-evident truth? We know what the truth is. From the moment of biological inception, it is a person. So the only question that remains is, are we going to protect that person through its entire life, or are we not?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about self-evident truths from around the founders' time period, and even before that, I mean, biological conception was not, from a legal definition, ever considered the beginning of life. The beginning of life was was basically considered either quickening or a natural birth. So how would you respond to that?
It is a self-evident truth. We all know it. Even children know it when they see mommy with their brother or sister in her tummy. Even children understand that that's a baby inside and that it is a person. I don't have to go through and try to prove scientifically that it is a person, because we know it is. It is up to the other side to disprove that it is a person.
All right. So, there's a lot of criminal cases where, if somebody is drunk, kills a pregnant lady, and the fetus dies, they charge them with 2 murders.
Absolutely. We already recognize it's a person. You're absolutely right. Several laws there's inheritance law. There's just all kinds of laws that already recognize it. So all I'm trying to do with House File 138 is to provide equal protection to all persons. And you'll notice I don't bring up the word abortion, because this bill goes far beyond that. This includes from biological inception until natural death. So this deals also with the euthanasia question that we're going to be dealing with more and more. This deals with, the story out of Utah where there were 9 murdered infants found inside a lady's house, and they suspect over 10 years. She's given birth to 7 babies and then killed them. I mean, this covers the whole gamut. I mean, if we're not going to protect life, what are we doing here? What difference does it make if we have a balanced budget? And I can't help but think of the hypocrisy when even today on the House floor, I hear people talking about we're not providing enough money for those most vulnerable to us, and we need to do this for our most vulnerable children. And I look at them and I'm like, you're this very same people that have no problem with killing children.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful statement. Tom, do you mind hanging on? We got to take a break, or do you have to go back to the debate?
No, I'm good to go.
All right.
Keep talking. I'll wait.
All right. Well, then we'll be back right after the break. We're talking. We have Representative Tom Shaw on the phone. When we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about constitutional carry and why that's important in Iowa. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back right after a word from our sponsors. You're listening to us every Tuesday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. right here on webcast1live.com.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Get away from us, you mean old credit card. We don't have any more money. We're in trouble now. Save us! Help! Somebody save us! Somebody help! Help! Save us!
Hi, I'm Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of Des Moines. If your credit card's a little too animated, give us a call.
Hooray!
If Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of America was your personal webmaster, Tom would filter out all bad debt emails. If Tom was your mailman, you'd never get any debt reduction junk mail. If Tom Coates was a lineman, he'd block any phone calls offering to reduce your credit card debt.
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America, and we're still your best choice for credit counseling. We're local, we're accountable, and we can do more. You make the call when the time's right for you.
When it comes to competition, there really is none for Consumer Credit of America.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. We've got Representative Tom Shaw on the line with us, who's given up some of his time, even though he's taking a short break to chat with us while he's doing the people's business, and we sure do appreciate him for that. The last segment we were discussing one of the bills that he introduced that didn't make it out of committee. He's got another bill that also had some issues early on in the session, maybe for political reasons, maybe for others, we don't know, but it's commonly called constitutional carry. Representative, why don't you tell us a little bit about that bill?
Well, what that bill does is, in simple language in the last paragraph, it says just because a permit is available for an Iowan to get, the lack of having a permit does not prohibit someone from carrying a firearm. And we leave that language in because if we are to get this passed, and we can get it passed, there's other states that still require a permit. So if an Iowan wants to go through the permit process so that when they go to other states to have a permit to show, that's fine. We're leaving that option available. But we're just saying here in the state of Iowa, you don't have to go beg the government for a permit.
Well, now, everybody who's listened to the show knows my stance on this is that the founding fathers meant for the citizenry to have the ability to obtain weapons equal to what the government had. Because the founding fathers, they had the most advanced weaponry available to them. They had sniper rifles. They had muzzle loading rifles. They had breech loading rifles. They had cannon. They had ships. Everything that the U.S. government had, that the British government had. And so I do believe that there should not be a limit upon what you are able to purchase. However, I've given this quite a bit of thought. I don't mind the old sheriff system back in, when I was part of the Wild West, where, if you go into town, the sheriff there says, boys, leave your guns at the post and pick them up on your way back out of town. Do you believe that we should have a system like that?
No, I believe an armed society is a safe society. And if you take the state capitol building here, they don't allow firearms here, but they have a system of security here. So the state has says we will be in charge of your security while you're inside of this building. That does not happen in other places like the theater in Aurora, Colorado. That guy that did the mass shooting out there specifically sought that theater out because it was a supposed gun-free zone. I am hoping one of these days that a victim or a victim's family member takes these business establishments to court, because in essence, when you're saying, and I believe the business has a right to refuse, it's private property, that trumps my right to carry onto their property. But at the same time, by denying me my means to defend myself while in their establishment means they have taken up responsibility for my self-defense. And if they fail in that, they should be held accountable.
Now, what do you think of this situation down in Nevada where this rancher named Cliven, I think it's Cliven Bundy, basically said, I'm not leaving my property. I have rights to this rangeland. And even though you guys have regulated every other rancher out of business in Clark County, Nevada, I'm still going to stay because I have the right to stay. What do you think about that entire situation and how people responded to that?
Well, I can tell you, I sat down with my wife last week, last Friday. If we were not still in session, I'd be out in Nevada, if that tells you anything. I think it's, and I don't know about the court case, the claims back and forth, what rights he has, what rights he doesn't have.
Well, I can tell you.
What concerns me is, you don't have 200 heavily armed federal agents show up and start destroying all his property. That is absolutely unnecessary. That's governmental tyranny. It could have been settled a lot easier than an armed confrontation like that.
Well, didn't he start? In fairness, didn't he start the armed confrontation? Didn't he and his family start making threats against the agents? I think they did.
Well,
but you don't need 200 armed federal agents out there and a no-fly zone and all of the rest. That is wrong. That is just wrong.
Well, the other part of the thing that nobody's being shown is video and pictures from that area where BLM rolled in with up-armored Humvees, MRAPs, all with cannon and machine guns everywhere. Snipers, and all this, and then started grabbing all of his cattle on range that he has traditionally used. And the part of the problem is, back in the day, and I wrote a blog about this, so you go check out docandlefty.com. But the bottom line is they erected a fence and everything else to keep everybody out. Well, there's three problems with this. One, this is land that they've utilized, and under the laws that they settled that land under from the U.S. government, they are still entitled to utilize that land. Number two, Cliven Bundy is not actually guilty of violating any laws. He is guilty of violating continually changing regulations. And three, the BLM was able to create a fence and block people out in Nevada. How come we're not able to build a fence that quickly along the border? I mean, it seems like we can keep people out of people's ranch lands, but we can't keep illegals out of the U.S.
All right.
Now we're coming right up to a break. Hey, can you stay with us a little bit, Tom?
I can.
All right, we'll be back right after the break. You're listening to Doc and Lefty on webcast1live.com. Boy, Lefty's, I might be the one with a black eye after the break here. Lefty's just chewing at the bit. We'll be back right at the break. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We got is Brad Zahn's commercial up? Yeah, we're going to hear a little message from Brad Zahn next. Thanks a lot for tuning in.
On the whole, I think Washington, D.C. is a terrible place. It's hot, it's humid, kind of smells, and it's totally lacking individuals who know how to create jobs and live within their means. Hi, I'm Brad Zahn, and I approve this message. And I'm running for Congress because we owe it to future Iowans to fix the mess that was created in Washington, D.C. I've had real experience creating jobs, cutting taxes, and balancing budgets while mayor and in the state senate. If you trust me to represent you, I promise I'll go to Washington, D.C. and do the right thing, and come home every Sunday to spend time with my wife, my kids, and my neighbors here in Iowa. We cannot leave this country in worse shape than we found it. I will not pass this debt on to my children or yours. I will go to Washington, D.C. and tell them enough is enough. Standing together is the only way we're going to get Washington, D.C. to listen, and I hope you'll join me in this fight.
Brad Zahn for United States Congress.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is Lefty with Doc and Lefty here, and we have blown past the first half hour, and right before the break, we were talking about this whole Bundy Ranch thing, and it sounds like my good friends Tom Shaw and Pat Bertroche have been following this a lot more closely. Go figure. But anyway, now we've gotten to the point in debate in this country that every accession of federal power is seen as tyranny, but that's okay, because I got a lot of thoughts about this, guys. So this gentleman, Mr. Bundy, when we're talking, and you said the right word earlier, Pat, tradition. He traditionally used this land. That doesn't mean that he legally used the land, does it? If you change a law on somebody to take his rights No.
Yes,
No. There was no change in law. 80% of Nevada.
Right, there was no change in law. There was a change in the regulations.
That's the same thing. 80%.
No, it isn't. Regulations are regulations.
No, a regulation is not a law. Come on now, Lefty. An attorney should know that. A regulation is not a law.
A regulation has the same effect of a law. You can enforce it the exact same way. Just because it doesn't pass through the legislature doesn't mean that it doesn't have the same practical effect. A regulation is an administrative rule that's enforceable by the executive branch.
It is administrative. It's not criminal.
Right. But not every law has a criminal component. And also, where does the executive derive his authority to create regulations in the first place? It's ceded to him by the legislature.
Right, but the problem is we have these agencies out there creating their own regulations without the oversight. We have legislators passing law with an intent, and then it goes over to the executive branch, and these agencies are going far beyond what the legislature, what their intent of the law was.
The bare facts of this.
I can give you a clear example.
Okay.
We passed a dove hunting bill here 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There were several amendments offered to ban the use of lead shot during dove season. The bill passed both the House and the Senate without any restrictions on the use of lead shot. It was clear through the denial of all the amendments in both chambers that the legislative intent was to have no lead shot ban. So we enact the law, the governor signs it, then it goes to DNR to establish the dove season, and the next thing you know, they come out with the regulation with a lead shot ban during dove hunting season. That's exactly what goes on with these agencies. They think they can do what they want.
The bare facts of this case.
We had to come back the next year and overrule basically what the DNR established.
Mm-hmm. We're going a little far afield here, though, because the bare facts of this particular case, of Cliven Bundy, right here, is that you have a guy who has been using federal land that's owned by the federal government. That
it is not owned by the federal government. It is owned by the state of Nevada.
No, it's not.
The Bureau of Land Management manages.
It's not owned by the state of Nevada. 80% of the land in Nevada is owned by the federal government. It's not owned by the state of Nevada. It's owned by the federal government.
It was until they became a state.
No, that's not. No, but you get you still get land grants from the United States government whenever you purchase packets of land. If you look at any title history, you'll see that. This was federal government land that he was being allowed to graze on and refusing to pay the fees for it. He was sued twice successfully by the BLM and refused to comply with judgments. He has no legal basis for what he's claiming to do. He has no legal right to do what he's claiming to do. And if this was a private citizen, Tom, I would have no doubt that you would be up in arms just like everybody else, that he's trying to circumvent the will of the law that he's decrying as illegal.
Well, there's a difference of opinion whether it's state land or federal land, because there are many others that are arguing that has to do from their transition from a territory into statehood. So
because
there's plenty on the other side that are arguing that is state property, and that's why he's making the claim that he's trying to pay his grazing fees to the state, through the county courthouse.
Yeah,
but he knows better, Tom. He knows better.
Well, hang on a second. Let me just briefly run through the legal history of that particular piece of land that they're arguing over. It was ceded to the U.S. government after the Mexican War. I don't know how to say it otherwise, but the Mexicans ceded it to us after the Alamo. When Nevada and Arizona and all those states down there started to form, though that land was ceded to the state with oversight by the federal government. They then developed a precursor to the BLM, Bureau of Land Management. And through a series of government grabs, which is how government works, they gradually regulated it all the way to 1994, where they said, well, we're going to put the desert tortoise on the endangered species list, and we're going to force all these people off. Now, one of the things that nobody's pointing out, but is factually true, developers down there developed on this land all the time. They just paid a fine for it. Well, that was very lucrative for the BLM that was stationed down there. When the housing bubble burst and development stopped, suddenly they're short on money. So then they started getting after all the ranchers who had for at least 100 years graze their cattle on this water-fed property. And that was something that when they first went out there, the U.S. government says, if you can make improvements and utilize this water more efficiently, you get the right to graze your cattle here. In 1994 or 95, I can't remember which, they changed that through regulation, not through law, but through regulation. Well, this Bundy fella is the last rancher there in Clark County. And he said, I have an arrangement with the rightful people who are supervising this, and that is the state of Nevada. And he hasn't paid. He's right. He hasn't paid his permits because he doesn't believe that he should. Even though the it's not the Supreme Court, but the federal courts have said you owe this money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, next thing you know, the BLM is saying, well, now we're just going to take your cattle. Well,
to enforce the judgment, they don't just take the.
Back in the day, they do take the cattle.
No.
That's what they did.
To enforce the judgment.
Hold on. 100 years ago, if you took somebody's cattle, it was called rustling. Simply because it's government-sponsored rustling doesn't mean it's not rustling.
It's execution of property. It's lawful. It's permitted. That's how people enforce their judgments, Doc.
All right. So they send all these people down. I mean, hundreds of these agents, and none of these agents back off. Now, I got another interesting thing. Jeez, I burned up all the time. I'm sorry. But the couple of interesting things that happened. A bunch of, quote, militias came rolling in with their own sniper rifles, with their own heavy equipment, and faced off against the BLM. So the BLM wasn't going to back down until the citizens stood up and said, we're not tolerating that. Not only did the BLM back off, they gave the cattle back. Now, second, the whole issue of this is supposedly the desert tortoise. 5 miles to the west, Senator Harry Reid's son, has brokered a deal to give land to a Chinese solar farm company to develop it out there. Because apparently having cattle on your grazing land disrupts their environment too much, but putting giant solar panels and windmills in the very same area isn't.
No.
And that's part of what's going on. No, that is the absolute truth.
It's not even close to his land. It's 30 miles north of Las Vegas.
Yeah,
it's
where do you think his land is?
His land is in the northeast part of the state.
No, go Google Map it. Go look at Google Maps. I mean, yeah.
Look at John Henniger's blog about this. Conservative blogger says that in his opinion, there is no connection between the solar deal with Rory Reid and this. They're not even close to each other.
I'm not saying that they are. I'm not saying that they're linked. What I'm saying is special privileges. It's okay to have the Chinese build a energy factory up there near where he is, or where this whole dispute's going on, within the range of the desert turtle, but it isn't okay for a rancher to run cattle on land he's run cattle on for 100 years. Tom, can you stay with us another segment, or do you got to go?
Well, I can stay on because I have a question for Lefty.
Okay. All right, we'll be back right after break. Listen to Doc and Lefty on webcast1live.com. Don't forget we have docandlefty.com where you can go read my blogs, Lefty's blogs. If you can, don't eat before you read it, because then you'll lose your appetite if you read Lefty's stuff. So we have Facebook, we have Twitter, and we'll be back right after break. Oh, Des Moines Anesthesia. Forgot all about those guys. Oh, I'm so sorry. Des Moines Anesthesia has offices in Fort Dodge and in Des Moines, Iowa. There's their number, 263-5316. It's Des Moines Anesthesia PC. If you look them up, these guys do a great job. I know these guys well. A couple of them have assisted on a couple of procedures I've had to have. They're just really fantastic and all around good guys. They'll answer all your questions. They'll take their time with you. So we really appreciate that. Briefly, I also want to say that Grandview College is hosting tomorrow night all the Senate candidates. Well, they've invited all the Senate candidates. I believe only 2 are showing up. And anyway, that'll be a great venue. The Grandview Young Republicans are putting that on, so it'll be a great show if you want to go out and figure out who you're going to vote with. All right. Now, Tom, you said you had a question for Lefty?
I do. Lefty, I was just wondering, were you aware of the First Amendment area that the BLM set up out there at the ranch, or about 3 miles away from the ranch?
The First Amendment?
They took some of the orange construction type fencing, and they fenced off a small area and put a sign on there saying First Amendment area, and that anyone that wanted to show up and protest or anything had to be in this little fenced-off area about 3 miles away from the ranch.
I had not seen that. What's your question?
The question is, do you agree with that? I mean, it's the First Amendment. Can the federal government just start dictating where the First Amendment applies and where it doesn't?
Oh, you mean in a physical location?
Yeah.
Well, they kind of always have, actually.
They just can't prevent you from...
They can't prevent you from talking, but they've always been able to prevent you... they've always been able to regulate the time, place, and manner of communication, just not the substance. That's always been the First Amendment interpretation.
When they're set 3 miles away from where they can even talk to any of these government officials, that's not in keeping with the First Amendment. We're always supposed to be able to keep in contact with government officials. They should be able to go up and talk to them and put them in an area 3 miles away. That's not the First Amendment.
Well, we're going to have to disagree, I guess, about how the First Amendment's been interpreted for decades. Then, because even
my issue with that. Give me a second, Tom. Give me a second.
Sure.
My issue with and I agree with Lefty. They can. I mean, that's what it says. I believe in the Constitution because I was just reading this yesterday. The Constitution, and the thing is you can't prevent people from saying things. The problem is the Westboro Church has sued the government and has won on several cases about where they're allowed to stand in order to protest these funerals. And so my thing would be if they're able to stand close, I don't think it's
proximity. They're still. I know. I have had to stand between them and a soldier's funeral.
Well,
yeah, I've done the same.
They're not put 3 miles away.
Well, in that case, then Tom, I'm not arguing with you necessarily about the actual physical distance at all. That's really not. I don't know enough about what the BLM's motives were, but I mean, you guys are right with respect to the pretty dastardly displays that the Westboro folks would put on at soldiers' funerals. I guess what I would say in that regard is if someone sued the BLM for what they would probably have to call an effective silencing of their free speech, they may win. I'm not arguing that what the BLM is doing is necessarily constitutional. I'm just saying that the principle of being able to regulate the time and place and manner of speech, that's always been. That's what I thought your specific question was. So if I misunderstood, I apologize.
Well,
that's fine. And if I could just follow up, they established a no-fly zone. I mean, are you comfortable?
No, I'm not comfortable with that.
30,000 feet, so even a news helicopter couldn't. I mean, is that government transparency?
I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable with the response as I've been been seeing it. The response, but the federal government has never been known for has a long history of disproportionate responses. But
and if I could go back just real quick before we run out of time, that's what I started this discussion with the preface of. I don't know the specifics of the court case, but I do know that this response was heavy-handed. The American people are getting tired of this. If you read what happened at Ruby Ridge, not that Randy Weaver was totally innocent, but the way the FBI and everyone carried out their operations, it's total overhandedness. It needs to stop. That's why you have so many people going out there to say, stop this.
Before we get too far into that, though, because the Ruby Ridge and Waco are very distinguishable in the fact that there were first of all, the FBI and the ATF in both cases had their facts wrong. But in this case, Cliven Bundy is clearly wrong. He is without legal authority to do what he's doing. He has, and he's just rejecting it because he doesn't agree with it. And Tom, I know that you're a great respecter for the rule of law. If a judge tells you to do something, you got to do it. I know that my personal business would not survive at all if I didn't have any recourse to enforce lawfully obtained judgments, and that's what BLM was doing. Albeit, I don't necessarily have the ability to grab Humvees and tanks and stuff, but I can certainly have a sheriff go out and enforce my judgment.
Well, and
that's what I'm saying. There are other ways. I believe in prudent law enforcement. As somebody that writes search warrants and has to do search warrants, you're prudent on when you serve them. if you know the guy goes to lunch at a certain place every day,
Yep.
and you can go pick him up there and just walk up to him, talk to him, and take him in on. That's what you do. You don't have to have a TAC team every time.
You don't, but it did sound like this guy and his family and the Nevada militiamen, or however they're characterized, who came in, were threatening with violence if these folks came onto the land.
The militia did not show up until the heavily armed federal agents all showed up in mass.
Yeah, I mean, it was really, and so then we go back to a conversation that Lefty and I have virtually at least every other week. And last week we were out in the middle of the street yelling at each other about it. This is why you should be able to tote weapons.
No.
This is the reason. Every liberal I've ever talked to about Second Amendment says, well, yeah, but this is the United States. It won't happen here. It just got done happening.
No, it didn't.
Here. It just did.
This was not an example of government tyranny.
Government was cattle rustling down there in Nevada.
They were enforcing it. Oh, my God.
And they went in heavy, and they were going to railroad these people off this guy's land under the force of law. This has happened over and over in American history, and this is why the Second Amendment is important. And this is why things that restrict your freedom. This
isn't a freedom case. This guy was wrong. He was against the law.
He was against the regulations.
He was
against the regulations,
That's
not the law. The regulations are different than laws.
So they're not enforceable. They're not enforceable then. That's what you're telling me. You're telling me that just because I don't, I no longer agree with the regulation that I can't smoke in bars and I can't do any particular thing that I want to do, right? I just don't agree with anything anymore. So I'm not going to do it. And I expect no consequences. That's what this guy's doing.
Well, this is what it's like. Having a physician's license is a right. I have rights under the law for my physician's license, right? If the governor or the medical board suddenly says, well, yeah, you still have your right to practice, but we're not going to let you practice in Des Moines, which is where my practice is at. You have to practice, in Grimes. Well, that's not where my business is at. That's not where I've been. That's a completely arbitrary line. That's a regulation. Now, I have my rights, just like Cliven Bundy has his rights established by the federal government way back when. And that's really what we're talking about. And this is the problem with bureaucratic overreach. It's the same problem with the EPA. You have all these government agencies reaching in where they really don't have authority, where the government has to go in and go, well, hold on, you can't do that. That isn't the way America is supposed to be run. That's much more like an oligarchy instead of a democracy.
Man, the way that you guys are explaining it, you'd rather have complete free anarchy. So that's
it's not free.
I'm giving up.
Anarchy.
No, I'm giving up on this one because
it's
you
not
guys
anarchy. It's regulations versus laws.
You've misunderstood the entire crux of the problem. This guy went on federal land. He needed a permit to do so.
He went on federal land long before the BLM was even existed.
So
he was using that land long before they changed the regulations again on him. We're going to be right back after break, Tom. Thanks for tuning in. Go to break, please, Franco. I'm a little flustered here. You're listening to Doc and Lefty on webcast1live.com. Stay tuned. These people help us keep our lights open and
the opinion's flowing,
and
right?
The opinion's flowing. And unfortunately, one of the results of this is Lefty keeps his mic on. So, we'll be back right after the break.
On the whole, I think Washington, D.C. is a terrible place. It's hot, it's humid, kind of smells, and it's totally lacking individuals who know how to create jobs and live within their means. Hi, I'm Brad Zahn, and I approve this message. And I'm running for Congress because we owe it to future Iowans to fix the mess that was created in Washington, D.C. I've had real experience creating jobs, cutting taxes, and balancing budgets while mayor and in the state senate. If you trust me to represent you, I promise I'll go to Washington, D.C. and do the right thing and come home every Sunday to spend time with my wife, my kids, and my neighbors here in Iowa. We cannot leave this country in worse shape than we found it. I will not pass this debt on to my children or yours. I will go to Washington, D.C. and tell them enough is enough. Standing together is the only way we're going to get Washington, D.C. to listen, and I hope you'll join me in this fight.
Brad Zahn for United States Congress.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking around until the last segment here.
One thing. During the break, I actually think I got Lefty to admit less regulation and less government is better government. And Frank can even testify to that.
That's all hearsay. It's all hearsay.
What do you think about that? What do you think about that, Tom?
It's all hearsay and inadmissible. Tom, don't answer that question. It should be stricken from the record. But Tom, I mean, you would agree with me. You would agree with me that even the federal government has the ability and the right to enforce its judgments. And even regardless of the regulation issue that Doc keeps harping about, which is missing the point, this guy was sued twice successfully by the BLM. They have for unpaid fines that were seen as lawfully owing, and he refused to pay them. Now, we don't just do that in this country. He had his day in court, he had due process, and he lost. And he's saying that his opinion about what the law should be trumps what the law actually is. Tom, would you agree with that?
You don't have to agree if the law or judgment is unjust. I mean, here he's claiming this is a state land. And
he lost that claim. He lost that claim,
the other thing that hasn't been brought up, I believe, but it's been reported that his ancestors back in the 1800s purchased the water rights or had something to do with the water and mineral rights, and those were passed down generation from generation. That all existed before the BLM.
Okay,
so,
what does that have to do with anything?
That whole equation comes into it because the BLM was out there tearing out his water tanks and destroying all the improvements that he had made to the land. So if he has had these water rights since, handed down generation, what right do they have to go in and start tearing his property out of there?
It wasn't his property. It wasn't his property.
And two, yes, if they feel the necessity to enforce their judgment, again, there is prudent law enforcement without sending Apache helicopters, snipers, up-armored vehicles, and 200 heavily armed agents out there.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, we assume, because this has been in the news for the last week, we assume it's only been going on for the last couple of weeks. This has been going on for over 20 years. And if you're talking about prudent law enforcement, wouldn't you understand? You would agree with me that these folks know him better than we do.
Well, they've been
dealing with him for 20 years.
Well, the problem is use of excessive force.
There was no force was being used.
Well, hold on. If you owe money and suddenly the SWAT team shows up to serve you a paper and
that's not what happened though.
Well, but the bottom line is the same thing.
He owed money.
He owed money.
They came out
and they can go and attach a lien to his property. They can go out. You've done collections. I'm from a collection lawyer family. There's all kinds of things you can do.
Which is why I'm astonished.
Besides show up en masse with weapons, bared, with cannon and MRAPs and the rest of it.
And they tried to do that. He wouldn't comply. They tried to do it. They tried to do it for 20 years. They've been trying to.
Well, I would have to say this too, also in your response, because we've had this discussion. I don't believe these judges are the final arbiter of what's constitutional. I believe, like our Iowa Constitution says, all political power is retained within the people. And I think the people out there and all the people who went out there to support them have made their constitutional declaration.
Yeah, well,
we get back to, this is why you have to have the Second Amendment, because the power does rest within the people. So what Lefty has basically told me, which we've had it out a couple of times during the break, are you willing to give over your power to a bureaucrat that's appointed that you have no way of getting rid of? Is that really what you want? I mean, these people, if you go back and you look at the case law, because at first I started thinking this Bundy guy is probably not the thing everybody should be standing up for, because I read what Lefty read. I thought, but when you go back and you read it, you can see where his point is. He has a piece of paper from the federal government way back in the late 1880s when they were all establishing stuff out there that clearly gives him rights to that water. And simply because a bureaucratic organization showed up and said, well, because of these desert tortoises are endangered, we're not going to let you feed, we're going to take away your water rights. That isn't due process at all. That's just regulating something out of business. And government does it all the time, and it's not right. What do you think about that, Tom?
Well, I think I also agree with your original point of we have all these assets to round up cattle. Why can't we secure our borders?
Irrelevant.
I mean, look at the. No, it is not irrelevant.
It's irrelevant. That's irrelevant to the discussion. It's a completely separate topic.
No, it is not. We are focusing resources that could be used down on our border.
Yeah, because we hear all the time, especially from the lefties here in Iowa. Well, Matt Schultz wasted all that money trying to prosecute 5 people, right? Well, look at the amount of money and resources the government has spent trying to rustle 300 cattle.
Trying to execute a judgment.
Well, it's still
call it what you want.
Well, okay, fine. Call it executing a judgment, but they've wasted all this time and money. Really, that's the way you execute a judgment down there? I mean, that's really what the issue is. Overhanded overreach by bureaucrats is the reason why we need the Second Amendment, and restrictions on the Second Amendment restrict your freedom. That's all there is to it.
That's okay.
And that's really the issue from the Bundy Ranch.
It's not, but whatever.
It is.
It's not even close. It's not even close. It's a citizen thinking that he stands above the law and that his opinion of what the law is greater and more relevant than what the law actually is. And that's wrong. And that's not how we do things in this country.
Well, but he's not standing up. I mean, he's utilizing the laws that he had to say, hey, hang on, these regulations aren't legal. I mean, there is a difference. So the bottom line is, can we at least agree that the BLM's response to this whole thing really was excessive? Can we agree on that?
The response is excessive, but he was wrong. He was wrong in what he did. He was wrong in threatening those workers. Let's talk about something else, because I mean, this is just, it's the whole conversation devolved into this idea that this guy is some kind of patriot and he's threatening the federal government. We fought a war 150 years ago to prevent this exact kind of behavior. And so whatever. I mean, so we're coming to the end of the show.
This is now just for the record. This is one of the very few times where I've seen Lefty frustrated to the point where he just wants to really punch me in the mouth. I can see that from here. Frank can verify that. He's about ready to go back. So anyway, we're Tom. Any last words on? We'll give you a last word on the subject.
Well, again, just to wrap it up, I just see it as a government overreach to send all of those assets there when it could have been handled in a much more prudent and efficient manner. I don't like the fact they show up there. The American people are on edge already from an overbearing federal government. We don't need sparks like this. We don't need the threat of bloodshed. All it would have taken would have been one agent or on the other side, a slip of the finger, just like happened at Ruby Ridge, a slip of the finger to set off a whole chain of events that we don't need. The federal government needs to be held accountable for their actions out there, and stop doing this.
All right.
Bottom line.
All right, Tom, we really appreciate you calling in tonight, giving us your opinion. Good luck up there at the Capitol.
Yeah, thanks for calling, Tom. We really do appreciate it.
Keep fighting the good fight. We want to thank all of our sponsors. What are our sponsors, Lefty?
Des Moines Anesthesia, Halo Capital, Brad Zahn for Congress. He's running in the 3rd District. We got a whole bunch of other ones. Your Shop, My Shop.
You bet.
All the webcast1live.com sponsors. Thank you so much. Thank you to our producer, Ryan. He's done a great job. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter, folks. Those are the best ways to get a hold of at least the small ideas. The big ideas we kind of discuss in a blog on the website. I'll be getting something up here on, and Tom, you might want to check this out. I think you'll be interested in it. A little discussion about natural law and natural rights as opposed to the social contract, kind of a rehash of some of those old arguments from the 18th century. I think might be interesting. But because I know that, Tom, you're into that kind of stuff, but check out the website, check out social media, check out Doc's Shop, because after this, I'm probably going to need a hug.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll be back next week, same time, same channel.
All right. See you guys.
Hi, I'm Representative Tom Shaw, and I love these guys. Both of them.
Love these guys. Get over here. Love both of them.